2 girls threw themselves in front of the Vampire King's carriage, screaming, "Help our mom, she's sick." When Dorian Blackthorn saw their faces, he froze. They looked exactly like someone he thought was dead. Dorian's obsidian carriage screeched to a halt on the cobblestone road, the horses rearing as Silas Rook yanked the reins with a curse. The entire royal procession shuddered to a stop, guards scrambling, hooves clattering against stone. Dorian's jaw clenched. He was already late for the council session, a critical meeting about border tensions with the human kingdoms. Every minute delayed was another opportunity for Chancellor Malric to undermine him. "Your Majesty," 2 children. Calderwin began from outside. "Move them," Dorian snapped, not bothering to look up from the blood-sealed treaty documents spread across his lap. But the carriage door flew open anyway, and there they stood, 2 small girls in pale blue dresses, dirt-streaked and trembling, blocking the path of the most feared creature in the kingdom. "Are you mad?" Dorian's voice was ice and venom as he stepped down, his black cloak billowing like wings. "You nearly died under my horses. Do you have any idea whose procession you've stopped? Hi, my beautiful family. Thank you for sticking around with me through our trying times. I really appreciate your love and support. We're finally back again to give you many more beautiful stories." If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The older girl, maybe 13, with tangled dark hair, stepped forward while the younger one clutched her sister's hand, eyes wide with terror. Both were thin, exhausted, their clothes torn and stained. "Please, Your Majesty," the older girl said, her voice breaking. "Our mom's sick. She's going to die if nobody helps us." Dorian glanced at the gathered crowd, humans pressing back against building walls, whispering, some making warding signs against evil. His irritation spiked. This was exactly the kind of spectacle he didn't need. "There are mortal healers in every district," he said coldly. "Go to one of them. I have urgent matters." "We tried." The girl's cry was desperate enough to cut through his impatience. "Every healer turned us away. They said Mom's sickness is unnatural, that they don't have the medicine for it." The younger child stepped forward then, small and fragile, and did something unthinkable. She grabbed his gloved hand with both of hers. "Please," she whispered, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged cheeks. "Mom is only 32. She's too kind to die." Something in those words, "only 32, pierced through Dorian's detachment. He looked down at the child properly for the first time, noting the genuine terror in her eyes. This wasn't a con, it wasn't a street theater. This was real desperation. "What are the symptoms?" he asked, his tone shifting slightly. "She coughs blood," the older girl answered quickly, sensing the opening. "And there are black marks under her skin, like ink spreading through her veins. Yesterday, she collapsed and started saying strange things, like she didn't remember where she was." Dorian went very still. Black veins. Delirium. Blood. Those were signs of a blood curse, rare, ancient, and impossibly difficult to cast. No common illness could produce such symptoms. "Where do you live?" The question came out sharper than he intended. "The outer district near the city wall, behind the old tannery." He knew the area, one of the poorest sections of the capital, where humans and half-breeds lived in ramshackle cottages, as far from vampire nobility as possible while still being within the city limits. The crowd was growing. Whispers spread like fire. The Vampire King, stopped by children. "What's happening? Is he going to help them or hurt them?" "Your Majesty," Silas said quietly from behind him. "The council? Damn the council." Dorian's eyes never left the girls. "What are your names?" The older girl hesitated, as if giving their names to a vampire king might be dangerous. Then, "I'm Kara. This is my sister Junie. Our mother is Ilara Ellis." The name hit him like a blade to the chest. The noise of the street vanished. The crowd, the guards, the horses, all of it became white noise. Dorian stared at the two girls and suddenly he saw them. Wide hazel eyes. The slight tilt of the jaw when anxious. The way the older one's mouth pressed into a thin line when she was afraid. Features he knew. Features he'd once traced with his fingertips in moonlight. Elara Ellis, he repeated, his voice hoarse. Yes, Your Majesty. Do you know her? Dorian's mind raced back 17 years. A village under siege. A young healer who had sheltered him despite knowing what he was. Whispered promises in the dark. The night he'd been dragged back to the citadel by his own soldiers, swearing he'd return for her. The council had told him she was dead, killed by witch hunters for harboring a vampire. He'd believed them. He'd mourned her. And now these children stood before him with her name on their lips, her face in their features, claiming she was alive and dying. Take me to her, Dorian commanded, his voice cutting through the air like steel. Now. Kara blinked, startled. Your Majesty, the council. The council can wait. He turned to Silas and Calder, both staring at him in shock. Clear the way. We're going to the outer district. As the girls led him through narrow alleys toward the poorest part of the city, Dorian's heart, a thing that rarely beat with anything but cold calculation, hammered against his ribs. They reached a tiny cottage leaning against the city wall, its roof sagging, door hanging crooked on rusty hinges. And there, collapsed against the stone wall, was a woman with dark hair streaked silver, wearing a simple healer's pendant he recognized instantly. Dorian knelt in the dirt, reached out with a trembling hand, and turned her face toward him. 17 years had changed her. Age, hardship, suffering, all of it written in the lines of her face. But it was her, Elara Ellis. The woman he'd loved. The woman he'd failed. The woman he thought he'd lost forever. Elara, he whispered, and the sound of her name on his lips after so many years felt like breaking and healing all at once. Behind him, Kara and Junie clung to each other, watching the feared vampire king kneel in the mud beside their dying mother, his composure finally, utterly shattered. Silas, lift her. Carefully. Dorian's voice cut through the shocked silence like a whip. Calder, clear the street. Move every cart, every merchant, every gawker. We rode to Blackthorn Keep. Now. Silas Rook moved instantly, sliding his arms beneath Elara's limp form with surprising gentleness for a warrior who'd killed men with his bare hands. She didn't stir, her breathing shallow and rattling. Calderwin was already shouting, forcing the gathering crowd back, his hand on his sword hilt. Make way for the king. Clear the road. Dorian climbed into the carriage ahead of Silas, barking orders to the driver. Forget the main avenue. Take the north route, fewer turns. And don't slow for anything. Kara and Junie scrambled in after their mother, eyes wide with confusion and fear as Silas laid Elara across the velvet bench. The girls pressed themselves into the corner, watching Dorian with the wariness of prey animals cornered by a predator. The carriage lurched forward, rattling over cobblestones at a reckless speed. Dorian leaned over Elara, his jaw tight. Her skin was cold, too cold, and those black veins spreading beneath her flesh pulsed faintly, like something alive. He'd seen blood magic before, but never like this. Never so deliberate, so patient. He bit into his own wrist without hesitation, letting a single drop of crimson fall onto Elara's pale lips. Vampiric blood could heal mortal wounds, accelerate recovery, even pull someone back from death's edge if administered quickly enough. It was instinct. Desperation. The drop touched her mouth and sizzled. Dorian jerked back as thin wisps of smoke curled from her lips. The blood evaporated as if it had struck molten iron, leaving behind the acrid stench of burned magic. No, he breathed. No, no. What's happening? Kara's voice cracked with panic. What did you do to her? Nothing. Dorian's hands curled into fists. This isn't an illness. It's a curse. A powerful one. Junie whimpered, burying her face in her sister's shoulder. Dorian forced himself to look at the girls, really look at them. They were terrified. Of course they were. He was the vampire king, The monster from every fireside tale used to frighten children into obedience. And yet they'd thrown themselves in front of his carriage anyway, because no one else would help. "She'll live," he said, the words coming out harder than he intended. "I'll make certain of it." Kara's eyes searched his face, looking for lies. She found none. Inside Dorian's chest, something he'd buried 17 years ago clawed its way back to the surface. Panic. Real, visceral panic. The kind he hadn't felt since the night his soldiers had dragged him from Alara's village, since he'd returned to find it burned and her gone. He'd convinced himself she was dead. Had forced himself to believe it, because the alternative, that she'd been alive all this time, suffering, alone, was unbearable. And now here she was, dying in his carriage, proof that every year of his carefully constructed numbness had been built on lies. The obsidian towers of Blackthorn Keep rose before them, sharp and severe against the twilight sky. The carriage clattered through the gates, past rows of armored vampire guards who snapped to attention, their faces hidden behind dark helms. Kara gasped. Junie went pale. The fortress was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, cold, precise, deadly. Blood-red banners hung from the parapets, and the stone itself seemed to drink in the fading light. "By the saints," Kara whispered. "This place." "Welcome to Blackthorn Keep," Dorian said grimly. "Try not to wander." The carriage stopped before the main entrance. Dorian was out before it fully halted, shouting for servants, for guards, for his high healer. "Oren. Where is Oren? Someone will find him now." Silas carried Alara through the towering doors, the girls hurrying behind, clinging to each other as they stared wide-eyed at vaulted ceilings carved with ancient vampire sigils, at tapestries depicting blood-soaked battles, at the sheer oppressive grandeur of immortal power. An elderly vampire in crimson robes appeared, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. "Your Majesty, I was told." He stopped mid-sentence, staring at the unconscious woman in Silas's arms. "Is that a human?" "High Healer Oren." Dorian's voice was steel. "Royal Infirmary. Immediately." "But Your Majesty, protocol dictates." "Now." Oren flinched and hurried ahead, leading them through winding corridors to the infirmary wing. He gestured to a stone table carved with healing runes, and Silas laid Alara down gently. The moment Oren's hands hovered over her chest, his expression shifted from annoyance to alarm. "Dark sigils," he muttered, his fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air above her skin. Woven into her very essence. And her heartbeat, erratic, bound by something I can't. He attempted a basic healing spell. The magic recoiled, snapping back like a struck serpent. Oren stumbled backward, shaking his hand as if burned. "Impossible. There's something ancient locked inside her. Something that actively resists intervention." "What is it?" Dorian demanded. "A curse." Oren's voice was hushed, almost reverent with dread. "A slow-binding curse of erasure, designed to kill over years, not days. Whoever cast this wanted her to suffer a long, slow deterioration, and wanted to ensure no healer could save her when the time came." Dorian's blood ran cold. Who in this kingdom could cast such a spell? Oren hesitated, his gaze flickering away. "Your Majesty, only a handful of elder mages possess that level of power, and all of them sit on your council." The words landed like stones in deep water. Outside the infirmary, Kara and Junie huddled on a bench, forbidden entry by stern-faced guards. Their whispers echoed in the vaulted corridor. "He's going to leave us here," Junie said, her voice small. "Once he realizes Mom can't be saved." "Sure." Kara squeezed her sister's hand. "We don't know that. He's the vampire king, Kara. The monster from the stories. Why would he care about us?" Kara didn't have an answer. Silas and Calder stood nearby, pretending not to listen. But Silas caught something, a flicker in the younger girl's eyes when the torchlight hit them wrong. Not quite human. And their scent. He exchanged a glance with Calder, who nodded slightly. They'd both noticed. Inside, Dorian made a decision that would scandalize the entire court. Move her to my private quarters. The healing chamber there. Oren's eyes went wide. Your Majesty, no mortal has ever. She's not staying in the general infirmary where every servant and courtier can gawk at her. Dorian's tone left no room for argument. My quarters. My personal healers. Understood. Before Oren could respond, raised voices echoed from the corridor. Council envoys, demanding an audience, insisting the delayed session could wait no longer. Dorian stepped into the hallway, his expression thunderous. Tell the council I'm occupied. But, Your Majesty, they insist. Then they can insist louder. I'm not leaving. The envoy paled and fled. Hours later, when the keep had fallen silent and even the guards stood like statues in the flickering torchlight, Dorian sat alone beside Alara's bed. She lay motionless in the healing chamber of his private quarters, surrounded by ancient magic and desperate hope. The curse marks pulsed faintly beneath her skin, counting down to an end he refused to accept. He reached out, hesitated, then took her cold hand in his. I failed you once, he whispered into the darkness. I won't fail you again. Whatever it takes, Alara. Whatever it costs. You won't die under my roof. Dawn light crept through the stained glass windows of Dorian's private chamber, painting blood-red patterns across Alara's unconscious face. He hadn't moved from the chair beside her bed all night, watching the curse marks pulse beneath her skin like a countdown he couldn't stop. His finger traced the air above one of the dark sigils spreading across her collarbone, careful not to touch, knowing his magic would only make it worse. How long have you been dying? He wondered. How many years have you suffered while I sat on a throne built on lies? Memory pulled him backward, 17 years into the past. The village had been small, forgettable, tucked into the mountains where human rebels hid from vampire patrols. Dorian had stumbled through its outskirts at midnight, clutching the dagger wound in his side, leaving a trail of black blood in the snow. An assassination attempt. 3 of his own guards, bought by rivals who wanted him dead before he could claim his father's throne. He'd killed 2. The 3rd had gotten close enough to gut him. The cottage door had opened before he could knock, and there she stood, a young woman with dark hair and steady hands, a healer's satchel already slung over her shoulder. You're bleeding on my doorstep, she'd said calmly, as if wounded vampires appeared nightly. I'll move, Dorian had gasped, if you point me toward the forest. Don't be ridiculous. Get inside before someone sees you. She'd known what he was. He could see it in her eyes, the slight widening when she noticed his fangs, the way her pulse jumped when his blood stained her floor black instead of red. But she treated him anyway. For 3 nights, he'd hidden in her cellar while the village slept above. She'd brought him stolen supplies, stitched his wounds with thread that burned against vampire flesh, and asked questions no human had ever dared ask. Why do your kind hate us so much? We don't hate you. We fear you. Fear us? We're the ones who die when you're hungry. And we're the ones who burn when you're frightened. Conversations in the dark. Her hands on his skin, clinical at first, then lingering. The moment he'd caught her wrist and pulled her close, half expecting her to scream. She'd kissed him instead. It had been reckless. Impossible. A vampire prince and a human healer, tangled together in stolen moments while the world burned outside. When his soldiers finally found him, he'd made her a promise. Once the kingdom is stable, once I've secured the throne, I'll come back for you. I swear it. She'd smiled, sad and knowing. Vampires don't keep promises to humans. This one does. Dorian's jaw clenched as the memory dissolved. He'd never returned. The council had told him she was dead within a month, killed by witch hunters who discovered she'd sheltered a vampire. They'd shown him reports, witness statements, even ash they claimed was from her burned cottage. He'd believed them. He'd mourned her. And all the while, she'd been alive, running, hiding, bearing his children. The thought struck him like a physical blow. If Alara had survived long enough to have children the right age, with features too familiar to dismiss, then everything he'd been told was a lie. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against stone. The girls. He needed to see the girls. Kara and Junie sat stiffly at the edge of an enormous four-poster bed in the guest chamber, staring at the tray of food a servant had brought. Neither had touched it. "I don't trust any of this," Kara whispered. "That wine looks like blood." "It is blood," Junie whispered back. "I can smell it." The door opened. Both girls jumped. Dorian entered, his expression carefully neutral. He gestured to the tray. "You should eat." "We're not hungry," Kara said quickly. "You haven't eaten since yesterday. I can't hear your stomachs from here." Kara flushed. Junie looked away. Dorian sighed and removed the goblet of blood wine, replacing it with water from a pitcher. "Better?" Junie reached tentatively for a piece of bread. Kara watched Dorian like he might strike at any moment. "Your mother is stable," he said, settling into a chair across from them. "The curse is old, deeply rooted, but she's surviving." "For now," Kara said bitterly. "For now," Dorian agreed. He paused. "Tell me about your lives. Where you've lived. How long have you been in the capital?" Kara's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why?" "Because I knew your mother once. A long time ago. And I'm trying to understand what happened to her after we lost touch." "The truth," carefully worded. Junie spoke up, her voice small. "We've lived in lots of places. Mom said we had to keep moving because people were scared of us." "Scared of you?" "Because we're different," Kara said flatly. "People could tell. They'd whisper about Mom, about where our father was. And sometimes," she hesitated, "sometimes men in robes would come asking questions. Mom would pack everything in the middle of the night, and we'd leave." Dorian's hands tightened on the armrests. "Robbed men. What did they look like?" "Old. Scary. They had symbols on their cloaks, circles and stars." "Council mages." "Your father," Dorian said carefully. "Did your mother ever speak of him?" Both girls looked down. "She said he was a good man who belonged to another world," Junie offered quietly. "That he would have loved us if he'd known about us. But that his world and ours could never mix." Dorian felt something crack inside his chest. "There's no father listed in our birth records," Kara added, defensive. "Mom said it was safer that way." He noticed it then, the way Kara's head tilted slightly, her eyes unfocusing. "Someone's coming," she murmured. "2 guards. They're talking about us." The conversation was happening 3 doors down the corridor. No human should be able to hear that. Dorian looked at Junie, who was staring at the water pitcher with her nose wrinkled. "That water smells strange. Like metal." "The pipes here are iron," Dorian said slowly. "Most humans can't smell the difference." Junie blinked. "I've always been able to smell things. Mom said it was a gift." "What other gifts do you have?" The girls exchanged nervous glances. "I heal fast," Kara admitted. "Cuts that should take weeks are gone in days. And I'm strong. Stronger than I should be." "I can see in the dark," Junie added. "And sometimes, when I'm scared, my fingernails get sharp, like claws." Dorian's heart hammered. "How old are you? Both of you. Exact birthdays." "I'm 14, Kara said. Born April 7th. I'm 10, June 23rd. Dorian did the math. April, 17 years ago, 9 months after the night he'd left Alara's village. June, 13 years ago, impossible unless Alara had been pregnant when they took her. Unless she'd given birth while running for her life. Both timelines fit. Both daughters born from the brief, desperate love affair he'd thought ended in tragedy. "Have you ever wondered why you're different?" Dorian asked, his voice rough. "Every day," Kara whispered. "But Mom said asking questions was dangerous. That some secrets were meant to protect us." Dorian stood, pacing to the window. His reflection stared back, pale, ancient, inhuman. If these girls were his daughters, then every assumption about vampire biology was wrong. Hybrids weren't supposed to exist. The council had always claimed it was impossible for vampires and humans to produce offspring. Either they'd lied about that too, or Kara and Junie were something unprecedented. The door burst open. Silas entered, his expression grim. Your Majesty, the council has sent an official summons. They demand an immediate audience regarding the human intruders brought into Blackthorn Keep. They're calling it a breach of protocol and a threat to security. Dorian didn't turn from the window. Tell them I'm busy. They say if you don't appear within the hour, they'll convene without you to discuss appropriate measures. Appropriate measures, Dorian repeated coldly. How considerate of them. He looked back at Kara and Junie, two frightened girls with their mother's eyes and abilities that shouldn't exist, hunted by the very people who were supposed to serve him. If they are mine, he thought, everything in this kingdom is about to change. Silas, double the guard on this chamber and on Alara's. No one enters without my explicit permission. Your Majesty, no one. Dorian's gaze returned to the girls, and for the first time in centuries, he felt something more powerful than duty or rage. He felt purpose. The throne hall of Blackthorn Keep was built to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow. Massive columns carved with the names of conquered kingdoms lined the walls, and crimson banners hung like wounds against black stone. At the far end, the obsidian throne sat empty, a seat of absolute power that had broken lesser kings. Dorian entered through the main doors, his boots echoing in the cavernous silence. The council members were already assembled, seated in a semicircle like judges at a trial. They rose as he approached, a gesture of respect that felt more like theater. He walked past the throne without pausing, choosing instead to stand before them, arms crossed. The message was clear. He would not be enthroned and lectured like a child. High Chancellor Malric Vanes spoke first. He was lean and sharp-featured, with silver hair pulled back severely and eyes that missed nothing. Your Majesty, thank you for finally gracing us with your presence. Get to the point, Malric. Beside him, Lady Vessa Nightfall inclined her head. She was ancient even by vampire standards, 3 centuries old, with porcelain skin and a smile that never reached her black eyes. The point, dear king, is that you've committed a grave breach of protocol. A human woman and 2 mortal children brought into the royal wing, housed in your private quarters. The scandal is already spreading through the court. Let it spread, Dorian said flatly. Gasps rippled through the lesser counselors, a collection of nobles and elder mages who echoed whatever Malric and Vessa declared. Your Majesty, Malric continued, his tone poisonously reasonable, we understand you acted on impulse. Perhaps a moment of misplaced compassion. But the damage must be contained before it threatens the stability of the kingdom. Contained how? The woman is dying, yes? A mortal illness, tragic but inevitable. Malric spread his hands, as if the solution were obvious. We propose transferring her to a mortal hospice where she can pass peacefully, attended by her own kind. The children can be placed in a reputable orphanage outside vampire territory. Generous financial support will be provided, of course. Dorian's eyes went cold. You want me to throw them out? We want you to make the rational choice, Vessa said smoothly. The choice a king must make. Your subjects are already whispering about the vampire king sheltering humans. If this continues, it will embolden those who question our supremacy. Rebellion begins with whispers, Your Majesty. Then let them whisper. Dorian's voice dropped to something dangerous. Because that woman isn't leaving Blackthorn Keep. Neither are her daughters. Malric's expression hardened. Your Majesty, we must insist. Tell me about 17 years ago. Dorian cut him off. A human healer named Alara Ellis. A village in the northern mountains. You told me she died. Witch hunters, you said. I want the full story. Now. The council chamber went silent. Malric exchanged a glance with Vessa before answering carefully. The woman in question was deemed a dangerous influence during a volatile time. You were young, newly ascended, and there were concerns about your judgment regarding mortals. What did you do to her? We did what was necessary. Vessa's voice was ice. You were needed on the battlefield, securing borders, crushing rebellions. A human entanglement would have been disastrous. The council voted unanimously to remove her from your path. Remove. Dorian's hands clenched. Define remove. She was escorted from the village and relocated, Malric said smoothly. We were later informed she had perished. An unfortunate consequence of the chaotic times. Who escorted her? Every eye turned toward the back of the hall, where Silas Rook and Calderwin stood at attention, their faces carefully blank. Well, Dorian demanded. Speak. Silas stepped forward, jaw tight. We were part of a detachment sent to retrieve a human healer from the northern mountains. We carried out orders to escort her away from the village. That's all we knew. All you knew, Dorian repeated. You didn't question why? We were soldiers, Calder said quietly. Junior soldiers. We followed commands. And what happened after you escorted her away? Silence. Dorian moved toward them, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. What happened to her? Silas's composure cracked slightly. She was handed over to council mages, Your Majesty. After that, we don't know. We were dismissed. Convenient. Dorian turned back to Malric. Council mages. Yours? Malric's expression didn't change. All operations were conducted under lawful council authority, with proper documentation sealed and archived. If you wish to review records from 17 years ago, I'm certain they can be located. Eventually. It was a wall, smooth, impenetrable, built from bureaucracy and old lies. Dorian's rage simmered beneath a thin veneer of control. The woman is dying from a blood curse. A slow-binding curse of erasure, according to my high healer. He tells me such magic requires royal-level power, the kind only Elder Council mages possess. Vess's expression remained placid. Blood curses are rare, but not unheard of. Perhaps she angered the wrong witch. Perhaps it's a remnant of old feuds between mortal factions. We cannot be held responsible for every spell cast in the kingdom. Can't you? Dorian's voice rose. When the sigils match spells in our archives. When the technique is taught only within these walls. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Your Majesty, Malric said, his tone sharpening, you're allowing emotion to cloud judgment. If word spreads that the Vampire King harbors a human lover, worse, that he's willing to defy his council over her, it will shatter the foundation of our rule. Nobles who believe in blood purity will see it as weakness. They'll rebel. Then let them. Vessa stood, her ancient power filling the room like a pressure drop before a storm. You would risk civil war over a dying mortal? You would tear this kingdom apart for sentiment. I would tear this kingdom apart for the truth. Dorian's voice echoed off the stone walls. Someone in this room cursed her. Someone wanted her dead slowly, painfully, in a way that could never be traced back here. And I will find out who. He turned toward the doors. This audience is over. Touch her or her children, and I'll consider it an act of treason. Your Majesty, Malric's voice cracked like a whip. You cannot simply. Watch me. Dorian strode out of the throne hall, leaving shocked silence in his wake. Silas caught up with him in the corridor, his expression tortured. Your Majesty, wait. Dorian stopped but didn't turn. There's something you need to know. Silas's voice was heavy with guilt. That night we took her. I was young, barely more than a recruit. But I saw something. Malric was there, in the shadows, with one of his mages. Before we left the village, the mage, he touched her. I saw a light flare beneath her skin, and saw her scream. I didn't understand what it meant then, but now. Now you realize he marked her. Dorian finished, his voice hollow. Yes. And you said nothing. I was a coward. Silas's voice cracked. I've carried that guilt for 17 years. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I'm so goddamned sorry. Dorian finally turned to face him. Sorry doesn't bring back the years she suffered. But if you want redemption, Silas, you'll help me prove what they did. Anything. Dorian looked back toward the throne hall, where his council sat plotting their next move. The betrayal hadn't come from enemies. It had come from his own inner circle, the men and women he trusted to govern beside him. And they'd stolen everything. They took her from me, he thought, cursed her, hunted her, and made me believe she was dead, so I'd never look for her. Find every record from 17 years ago, Dorian said quietly. Every mission report, every sealed document, every whisper about the northern villages. I want proof. Yes, Your Majesty. As Silas disappeared down the corridor, Dorian stood alone in the shadows, fury and grief warring inside him. They'll answer for this, he vowed silently. Every last one of them. Alara's eyes opened to unfamiliar darkness. Stone ceiling, silk sheets, the scent of old magic and burning incense. Pain lanced through her chest with every breath, but it was distant now, muted, as if someone had wrapped her suffering in wool. Where? You're awake. The voice came from beside her bed. Deep, familiar in a way that made 17 years collapse into nothing. Alara turned her head and found Dorian Blackthorn sitting in shadow, his pale eyes reflecting candlelight like a wolf's. No, she whispered. No, this is a fever dream. You're not real. I'm real. He leaned forward into the light, and she saw the exhaustion etched into his ageless face. You collapsed. Your daughters found me. I brought you to Blackthorn Keep. Memory crashed back, Kara and Junie running toward the distant sound of hooves, her own voice rasping, "Find someone, anyone," the world tilting as darkness swallowed her. The girls, safe, unharmed, sleeping in the next chamber. Alara tried to sit up. The room spun. Dorian's hand shot out to steady her, and she flinched away from his touch as if burned. Don't. Her voice cracked. Don't you dare act like you care. His hand withdrew. Alara. You abandoned me. The words erupted like a dam breaking. You made promises you never kept. You said you'd come back, and instead you sent your monsters to hunt me. I never. Dorian's composure fractured. I never sent anyone. I thought you were dead. Convenient. The council told me you'd been killed by witch hunters within a month of my departure. They showed me reports, evidence. Evidence? Alara laughed bitterly. Your council burned my village. Your vampires dragged me into the woods and branded me with this curse. She pulled at the neckline of her nightgown, revealing the dark sigils spreading across her skin. They told me if I ever sought you out, they'd kill my daughters in front of me. So forgive me if I don't believe your convenient ignorance. The door burst open. Kara and Junie rushed in, their faces pale with fear and relief. Mom. Junie threw herself onto the bed, sobbing. Kara stood rigid between Alara and Dorian, her young face hard with protective fury. What did you do to her? Kara demanded. Nothing, Dorian said quietly. She's stronger than she was. The curse is still there, but we've slowed its progress. We. Alara's eyes burned. You mean the same people who put it there? Kara looked between them, confusion breaking through her anger. You know each other? Alara's hand found her daughter's faces, tracing the familiar features she saw every day and the unfamiliar ones she'd tried not to notice. The shape of Kara's jaw, the intensity of Junie's eyes. A long time ago, she whispered, before you were born. Understanding flickered across Kara's face, followed by horror. She looked at Dorian with new comprehension. We don't know what he is. Alara cut her off. Except a king who makes promises he doesn't keep. I searched for you. Dorian's voice was raw. For months after they told me you died, I sent scouts, questioned witnesses, tore through every report. I found nothing because they'd erased you. Burned records, silenced witnesses, made you disappear. Yet here I am, dying from their curse. Tell me what happened. Everything. Alara closed her eyes, remembering. 3 weeks after you left, they came at night. Cloaked vampires, wearing council insignia. They dragged me from my cottage while the village watched. One of them, silver-haired, with cruel eyes, touched my chest, and I felt fire spread through my veins. Malric, Dorian breathed. He said you'd never find me, that you'd be told I was dead, and if I ever tried to reach you, They'd hunt down anyone I loved and make me watch them die slowly. Her voice broke. I was already pregnant with Kara. I ran. Junie's small hand tightened on her mother's. Pregnant. For 17 years, I've moved from village to village, using false names, hiding in places so poor even vampires didn't bother looking. Every few months, the curse would tighten, blackouts, bleeding, pain, and I'd know they hadn't forgotten me. Kara's hands trembled. The robed men who used to find us. The ones who made us run.
They were looking for you.
For all of us. Alara looked at Dorian, her eyes shining with old grief. I loved you. I believed you when you said you'd return. And when they told me you'd sent them, I thought my heart would stop. I didn't, Dorian said hoarsely. Alara, I swear on every blood oath I've ever taken. I didn't know. Then you're a king who doesn't know what his own council does in his name. I'm not sure which is worse. Silence fell, heavy with 17 years of pain. Hours later, after the girls had reluctantly left to rest, High Healer Orin returned with test results and ancient texts. The blood resonance is unmistakable, Your Majesty. Orin's hands shook slightly as he presented the parchment. Both children carry hybrid signatures. Human physiology, vampire essence woven through their blood. It should be impossible. But it's not, Dorian said.
No.
Orin opened one of the ancient tomes, its pages brittle with age. There's a prophecy, old enough that most believe it is a myth. It speaks of a ruler born of both realms, mortal and immortal, who will either unite the kingdoms or destroy them utterly. Dorian stared at the archaic script. One ruler, not two, which makes this unprecedented. 2 hybrid children from the same bloodline? Your Majesty, this changes everything we understand about vampire biology and magical law. On the balcony overlooking the keep's inner courtyard, Kara gripped the stone railing and tried to make sense of the past 2 days. Her mother knew the vampire king. I loved him, which meant
no.
She couldn't think about that yet. She leaned further out, watching guards patrol below. Too far. She was leaning too far. She was going to... Kara pitched forward with a yelp and landed in a crouch on the cobblestones 2 stories below, completely unharmed. The guards spun toward her, weapons drawn. Kara stared at her hands, her legs, the distance she'd just fallen. What am I? Fury and confusion warred inside her. Everyone had lied. Her mother, the healers, everyone who'd told her she was just special or gifted when she was clearly something else entirely. Something not human. Midnight. The assassin moved like smoke through Blackthorn Keep, past sleeping guards and through warded doors that shouldn't have opened. Malric's orders were clear. The children could not be allowed to live. He slipped into the girls' chamber, blade drawn, and found Silas Rook waiting in the shadows. Council lapdog, Silas said quietly, drawing his sword. I was wondering when you'd show. The fight was brief and brutal. The assassin was skilled, but Silas fought with the fury of 17 years of guilt. When it ended, the intruder lay bleeding on the floor, and Kara stood in the doorway, staring at Silas with wide eyes. You saved us. Someone should have a long time ago, Silas said roughly. For the first time, something like trust flickered in Kara's expression. Dawn found Dorian standing beside Alara's bed once more, holding the test results. There's something you need to know, he said softly. She looked at him warily. Kara and Junie. They're not just human. Orin confirmed it. They carry vampire essence, my essence, woven through their blood. Alara's breath caught. They're ours, Alara. Our daughters. And, according to prophecy, they're going to change the world. A tear slipped down her cheek, followed by another, as 17 years of secrets finally collapsed. I know, she whispered. I've always known. I've always known. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and terrible. Dorian stared at Alara, watching 17 years of hidden truth crack open across her face. Fury blazed in her eyes, but beneath it, heartbreak. and something that looked dangerously like hope. You knew. His voice was hollow. All this time, you knew they were mine, and you never. Never what? Alara pushed herself upright despite the pain lancing through her chest. Sought out the vampire king who abandoned me? The one whose council branded me like cattle and threatened to murder my children if I ever spoke your name. I didn't abandon you. You left. The rawness in her voice made him flinch. You promised to return, and instead your people came with fire and curses. What was I supposed to think? That you were ignorant? That the great vampire king didn't know what his own council did in his name? I didn't. And now you care. Bitterness dripped from every word. Now that you know they're your bloodline, your heirs, suddenly they matter. Where were you when Kara was 6 and nearly died from fever because no healer would touch us? Where were you when Junie woke screaming from nightmares about men in robes who wanted to hurt her? Alara. You're 17 years too late, Dorian. The accusation struck like a blade. Dorian felt something inside him twist and break. You're right, he said quietly. I failed you. I failed them. I failed to see the vipers in my own court, failed to question convenient lies, failed to search hard enough. But I'm here now, and I swear to you, on my immortal life, on every oath I've ever made, I will protect you. All of you, whatever it costs. Even your throne? Especially my throne. Alara searched his face for deception and found only grim determination. You can't stand against an entire council, she whispered. They're too powerful, too entrenched. Then I'll tear them out root and branch. And if that destroys your kingdom? Dorian's eyes blazed silver. Then let it burn. In the guards' quarters, Silas Rook and Calderwin sat across from each other, a bottle of blood wine between them, untouched. 17 years, Calder said finally. We've carried this for 17 years. Silas nodded, staring at his hands. I see her face sometimes. In dreams. The way she screamed when Malric's mage touched her. Calder closed his eyes, remembering. The village had been dark, silent except for their boots on dirt roads. Malric had given the orders personally. Retrieve the human healer, bring her to the forest clearing, ensure no witnesses. They'd found Alara in her cottage, asleep. Calder had been the one to grab her, to clamp a hand over her mouth when she tried to scream. He could still feel how she'd struggled, how terrified she'd been. In the clearing, Malric's mage had stepped forward, an ancient vampire with hands like claws. He'd pressed his palm to Alara's chest, and light had erupted beneath her skin, black and writhing like smoke. Her scream had been inhuman. A slow death, Malric had said calmly. Years from now, when the king has forgotten her, the curse will tighten. She'll die thinking he never cared at all. Calder had wanted to protest. Silas had gripped his arm, silencing him. They were junior guards. Speaking out meant execution. So they'd stayed silent. Later, they'd heard rumors, a human woman spotted in distant villages, pregnant, then with a child, then 2. Calder had wondered, had hoped he was wrong.
He hadn't been.
We're damned, Silas said quietly. Both of us. Yes. Calder opened his eyes. But maybe we can do something right before the end. They looked at each other, and a decision settled between them. Unspoken, but absolute. We protect them, Silas said. The woman and the girls. Whatever it takes. Even if it means betraying the council? Especially then. They clasped hands across the table, sealing an oath that would make them traitors to half the kingdom. The council chamber thrummed with tension. Malric Vane stood at the center like a prosecutor, his voice sharp and measured. Your Majesty has had time to consider our proposal. We await your decision. Dorian sat on the obsidian throne, exhausted but immovable. Around him, the council members watched like carrion birds. My decision, he said slowly, is that Alara Ellis and her daughters remain under my protection. They will not be removed from Blackthorn Keep. They will not be harmed. Anyone who attempts otherwise will answer me personally. Vessa Nightfall rose, her ancient power making the air heavy. Then you leave us no choice. We hereby call for a vote of abdication. Gasps rippled through the chamber. On what grounds? Dorian's voice was ice. Dereliction of duty. Compromised judgment. Harboring mortals in violation of our most sacred laws. Malric's eyes gleamed. A king who chooses sentiment over stability is no king at all. Noble houses will rally to our cause, Vessa added. Those who believe in blood purity, in the supremacy of our race. You'll be removed from power, and the mortals will be dealt with appropriately. Dorian stood slowly, descending from the throne. His voice, when he spoke, was utterly calm. Then let me make this simple. If you force me to choose between this throne and my family, I choose them. I will abdicate, relinquish every title, every privilege, every scrap of power. And I will take Alara and my daughters far from this cesspit of vipers you call a council. Stunned silence. Some counselors looked shaken. Others leaned forward hungrily, smelling victory. You would abandon your people? Malric's voice dripped with false concern. Condemn them to chaos and civil war? I would free them from counselors who use fear and lies to control their king. Dorian's gaze swept the room. How many of you knew? How many of you stood silent while an innocent woman was cursed and hunted for the crime of loving me? No one answered. Dorian turned and walked out, leaving his throne empty behind him. In a shadowed alcove outside the council chamber, Malric and Vessa conferred in urgent whispers. He's more stubborn than anticipated, Vessa hissed. Then we moved to the final option. Malric's smile was cold. The blood moon rises in 3 days. If Dorian attempts the ritual to break her curse, he'll be vulnerable. Weakened. That's when we strike. A coup. A necessary transition of power. We'll have noble houses positioned, loyalist guards replaced. By dawn, Dorian Blackthorn will be dead, and the mortals with him. Vessa's eyes glittered. And the prophecy ends before it begins. Dorian found Alara in the healing chamber, staring out the window at the city lights below. They're going to force me out, he said quietly. Call for abdication. Rally the noble houses. And, if that fails, they'll kill you, Alara finished. Likely. Then let me go. She turned to face him, tears streaking her cheeks. Take Kara and Junie somewhere safe, but let me go. If I'm gone, they have no leverage. No, Dorian. If I let you die to appease them, I become exactly what they want, a king who values power over people. I won't do it. I won't become that. Even if it destroys everything? Even then. Outside the door, hidden in shadow, Kara pressed her back against a cold stone wall, listening. She'd come to confront Dorian, to demand answers, to rage at him for the years of lies. But hearing his voice now, raw, determined, willing to sacrifice a kingdom for her mother, for them, something shifted inside her. Maybe he wasn't a monster from the stories. Maybe he was just a man who'd been lied to as much as they had. Dorian returned to his private study, where Orin waited with an ancient grimoire spread across the desk. The ritual is possible, the healer said carefully. But your majesty, the cost. I know the cost. Dorian traced the archaic symbols on the page. During the blood moon, I can channel my immortal essence to break a royal-level curse. It will require blood, magic, and a bond between myself and Alara. If successful, the curse will shatter. If not, Orin hesitated. Both of you could die. And if I do nothing, she dies anyway. Yes. Dorian closed the grimoire with finality. Then we attempt the ritual. 3 days from now, when the blood moon rises, we end this. Your Majesty, the council will use your vulnerability. Let them try. Dorian's reflection stared back from the darkened window, pale, ancient, determined. 3 days, he thought. 3 days to save her, expose them, and either reclaim my kingdom or watch it burn. Either way, I'm done with lies. 3 days. 3 days to master a ritual that might save Alara or kill them both. Dorian bent over the ancient grimoire in his study, candlelight flickering across pages written in blood ink centuries old. Oren stood beside him, translating the archaic script with trembling fingers. The curse is woven into her life force, Oren explained, tracing a diagram of intersecting circles. To break it without destroying the host, you'll need to create a counterbond, one strong enough to overpower the original magic.
How? Blood.
Yours, hers, and... Oren hesitated. The children's. The ritual requires a complete family bond. Their hybrid nature might actually strengthen the connection. Dorian's jaw tightened. They'll be in danger. They're already in danger, Your Majesty. At least this gives them a chance to fight back. In the training courtyard, Kara faced Silas Rook across worn cobblestones, both breathing hard. Again, Silas commanded. Kara lunged. Her fist connected with a training dummy, and the wooden post exploded into splinters. She stared at her unmarked knuckles in shock. I didn't mean to. You're holding back, Silas said. That's the problem. You've spent 14 years pretending to be weak. Now you need to learn what you actually are. What am I? Stronger than most vampires. Faster than most humans. Something new. He tossed her a practice sword. Now stop apologizing for it and fight like you mean it. Kara caught the blade, and for the first time in her life, something fierce and wild unfurled inside her chest. She attacked. In the eastern tower, Junie sat cross-legged on cold stone, her small hands pressed flat against the floor. Calderwin knelt beside her, patient and watchful. Feel the energy, he murmured. Old buildings like this, they're soaked in magic. Centuries of spells, wards, blood oaths. Can you sense it? Junie closed her eyes. At first, nothing. Then, lines of light appeared behind her eyelids, pulsing through the stone like veins. Power flowing through the keep's foundations, old and deep and aware. I see them, she whispered. They're everywhere. Good. That's your magic waking up. Now, let it go. She opened her eyes, and the vision faded. Why are you helping us? You were one of the men who hurt Mom. Calder's expression darkened with old shame.
Yes.
And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. Junie studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, teach me how to defend myself. So next time someone comes for us, I can fight back. Calder drew a practice dagger and placed it in her small hands. Let's start with the basics. Alara woke up screaming. Dorian was beside her in an instant, gripping her shoulders as she convulsed. The curse marks flared black across her skin, and her eyes rolled back. Alara. She gasped, clutching his arms. I saw him. Malric. In my mind. He was laughing, saying he'd watch me die just like I watched our daughter suffer. Visions are part of the curse, Oren said urgently, administering a tincture that smelled of herbs and something darker. It's tightening. We're running out of time. The seizure passed. Alara collapsed against the pillows, ice spreading through her veins until her lips turned blue. Dorian wrapped her in his cloak, his own body temperature doing little to warm her. 2 more days. Just hold on for 2 more days. And if the ritual fails? Her voice was barely audible. It won't, Dorian. It won't. Later, when the episode had passed and Alara could sit up again, Dorian brought her tea, mortal herbs, not blood wine. She accepted it with shaking hands. Do you remember the night we met? She asked quietly. Every detail. He settled into the chair beside her bed. You called me an idiot for bleeding on your doorstep. A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. You were an idiot, stumbling through a human village, leaving a trail any hunter could follow. I was desperate. And then you opened your door, and I thought, here's someone who'll either save me or turn me in for the bounty. I almost did turn you in. She sipped the tea. But then you looked at me like I was a person, not prey.
Like you saw me.
No one had ever looked at me like that before. Dorian reached out, hesitated, then took her free hand. She didn't pull away. I fell in love with you in 3 days, he admitted. Terrified, wounded, hiding in your cellar, and I fell completely. I know. I felt it too. Her fingers tightened around his. That's what made leaving so devastating. I thought what we had was real. It was real. Then why didn't you fight harder to find me? Why did you believe them so easily? The question hung between them, sharp and necessary. Because I was young and stupid and trusting, Dorian said rawly. Because I believed the council served the kingdom, not themselves. Because the evidence they showed me was convincing, and I wanted to believe you died quickly rather than. He gestured helplessly. Rather than this. 17 years of suffering. I thought you'd sent them, Ilera whispered. I thought you decided a human wasn't worth the political cost.
Never.
Gods, Ilera, never. They sat in silence, hands clasped, 17 years of misunderstanding slowly unraveling between them. I'm afraid, she finally said. Not dying? I've been dying for years. I'm afraid of what happens to Kara and Junie. Humans will hate them for being part vampire. Vampires will hate them for being part human. Where will they belong? With me. Dorian's voice was steel. I'll publicly recognize them as my heirs. My daughters. And anyone, human or vampire, who threatens them will answer to me. That will start a war. Then let it start. Ilera searched his face and saw only unwavering determination. You've changed. The boy I loved was gentler. The boy you loved hadn't spent 17 years on a throne surrounded by vipers. But I'm still him, underneath. And I still love you. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable. Ilera's eyes filled with tears. This is a terrible time to tell me that. I know. But I might not get another chance. Midnight. The council wing. Silas and Calder moved like ghosts through darkened corridors, past sleeping guards and warded doors. They'd learned the patrol routes, memorized the blind spots. Malric's office was locked with blood magic. Calder produced a stolen key, taken from a loyalist guard who'd had an unfortunate accident. Inside, they found what they were looking for, sealed letters bearing the crests of rival vampire houses and human zealot factions. Promises of support, agreements to recognize Malric as rightful king, plans to execute Dorian during the Blood Moon ritual. He's been planning this for months, Silas breathed. Longer, Calder corrected, holding up an older document. This is dated 6 months ago. He knew Ilera was alive. He's been waiting for her to resurface, so he could use her against Dorian. They gathered the evidence and fled. Dorian read the letters with cold fury. He knew, he said quietly. The whole time he knew she was alive and dying. He waited for her to become desperate enough to seek help. So the ritual would be the perfect trap, Silas finished. You'll be vulnerable, focused on saving her. That's when he strikes. Then we give him what he wants. Dorian's eyes gleamed silver. We proceed with the ritual. Let him think I'm distracted and weak. When he makes his move, we'll be ready. Your Majesty, this is incredibly dangerous. Everything worth doing is. The blood moon rose on the third night, huge and crimson, bathing Blackthorn Keep in light the color of fresh wounds. In the hidden ritual chamber beneath the keep, a circular room carved with ancient sigils, Dorian, Ilera, Kara, and Junie gathered. Orin prepared the spell components, silver bowls, consecrated blades, chalk made from vampire bone. Once we begin, he warned, the ritual cannot be stopped. Either the curse breaks or... We know the risks, Dorian said. Above them, Malric's forces moved into position, convinced the Vampire King was about to make his final mistake. The blood moon blazed overhead, and in the depths of Blackthorn Keep, a family torn apart by lies prepared to either reclaim their future or die together trying. The blood moon hung swollen and crimson over Blackthorn Keep, so large it seemed to press against the obsidian towers. The streets below fell silent. Even mortals felt the weight of old magic stirring in the air. Deep beneath the fortress, in a ritual chamber untouched for centuries, 4 figures stood within a circle of ancient sigils carved into black stone. Dorian, Alara, Kara, and Junie, connected by blood, separated by 17 years of lies, united now in desperate hope. High Healer Orin moved around the circle's edge, his voice rising in a chant that made the air shimmer. Candles burned with silver flame. The sigils began to glow. "Your Majesty," Orin said, his voice strained. "Once I open the channel, you must pour your essence into her continuously. If you stop, if you hesitate." "I understand." Dorian took Alara's hands. She was trembling, her skin already icy from the curse tightening its grip. "Look at me. Whatever happens, look at me. Dorian. I'm not losing you again." Orin's chant reached a crescendo. The sigils flared brilliant white, and the ritual began. Above, in the throne hall, Malric Vane stood surrounded by armored vampires bearing his colors, crimson and black, the old guard who believed in blood purity above all else. Lady Vessa Nightfall stood beside him, ancient and terrible, her smile sharp as broken glass. "The ritual has started," a scout reported. "The king is fully committed. Then we move." Malric's voice was cold silk. "Seal the exits. Kill anyone loyal to Dorian. And bring me the half-breed abominations alive. I want them to watch their parents die before we execute them." Vessa's laugh was like wind through a crypt. Finally, a kingdom ruled by strength again, not sentiment. The coup began with fire.
Pain.
Dorian felt his immortal essence draining through his hands into Alara, a torrent of power that left him gasping. Inside her body, the curse recognized the intrusion and fought back, black tendrils of magic coiling around his energy, trying to strangle it. Alara screamed. Her back arched, curse marks blazing across her skin like brands. The pain was unbearable, being torn apart from the inside, burned and frozen simultaneously. "Mom," Kara lunged forward, grabbing her mother's arm. Junie seized the other side, both girls crying, desperate. And something shifted. Power flowed from the girls into Alara, raw, untrained, instinctive. Hybrid magic that belonged to neither world, but somehow bridged both. The ritual circle blazed brighter. "Don't let go," Orin shouted over the roaring magic. "The bond is forming." Explosions rocked the keep. Silas Rook and Calderwin stood in the main corridor as traitorous guards poured through, wearing Malric's colors. For a long moment, the loyalists tensed, uncertain whose side the two veterans would choose. Silas drew his sword and placed himself in front of the rebels. "Wrong hallway," he said quietly. The fighting was brutal and close. Steel rang against steel. Blood sprayed across ancient stone. Silas and Calder fought like men possessed, cutting through Malric's forces with 17 years of guilt driving every strike. "The ritual chamber," Calder shouted. "They're pushing toward the lower levels. They had to hold. Just a little longer." Inside Alara's mind, or perhaps inside the curse itself, memories erupted like shrapnel. The village is burning. Cloaked figures dragging her into the forest. Malric's cold smile as his mage pressed a hand to her chest. "You were a mistake," Malric whispered in the memory. "A weakness we cannot allow. But killing you outright would raise questions. So instead, you'll die slowly, forgotten, proof that the Vampire King's sentimentality leads only to suffering." The brand seared into her flesh, her screams echoing through empty woods. Stumbling away, pregnant and terrified, knowing no one would believe her, knowing no one would help. Years of running, hiding, watching her daughters grow up afraid. "No." Alara's voice tore through both memory and reality. "You don't know my pain anymore." The curse shuddered and began to crack. Malric and Vessa burst into the ritual chamber with elite warriors at their backs, just as Silas and Calder had known they would. "Stop this madness." Malric's voice boomed. "You're destroying the kingdom for mortal filth." Dorian, kneeling within the circle, barely conscious from the drain of power, turned his head slowly. His eyes blazed silver fire. "Touch them," he rasped, "and I will end you." Vessa laughed. You can barely stand, full king. You've poured your essence into a dying mortal.
You're weak.
Finished. Two warriors lunged for Kara and Junie, trying to drag them from the circle. Kara's eyes flared gold. Power exploded outward, a shockwave of hybrid magic that sent the warriors flying across the chamber to crash against stone walls. The force of it cracked the floor itself. Kara stared at her hands, shocked and terrified. I told you, Dorian said, finding his feet though he swayed. They are under my protection. Junie, tears streaming, pressed her small palms to the ground. Energy lines lit up beneath her fingers, the keep's ancient wards responding to her call. Threads of blood magic erupted from the floor, wrapping around Malric's legs, disrupting his spells before they could form. Impossible, Malric hissed. The chamber doors burst open. Silas and Calder arrived, bloodied and breathing hard, and placed themselves between the counselors and Dorian's family. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then both guards knelt, not to Malric and Vessa, but to Dorian and the daughters they'd helped destroy 17 years ago. We stand with the true king, Silas said. Battle erupted. Vessa moved like lightning, her ancient power crushing loyalist guards. Calder met her head-on, sword flashing. They danced through violence, perfectly matched, until Calder found an opening and drove his blade through her chest. The ancient vampiress gasped, surprise etched on her face, and crumbled to ash. Malric, seeing his ally fall, abandoned pretense and lunged directly for Alara. If he killed her, the prophecy died, the ritual failed, everything returned to his control. Dorian threw himself in front of the blow. Malric's cursed blade, black iron, poison forged, sank into Dorian's shoulder. He collapsed to one knee, agony lancing through him. Foolish to the end, Malric snarled. But the ritual didn't stop. Dorian's blood spilled into the circle, mixing with Alara's, with the magic already flowing from Kara and Junie. 4 bloodlines becoming one, parent, children, vampire, human, past and future colliding in a single desperate moment. Alara screamed as the curse shattered. Light erupted from her chest, blinding, pure, furious. The dark sigils burned away like paper in flame. The curse that had been killing her for 17 years simply ceased to exist. The shockwave threw Malric across the chamber. He hit the wall hard enough to crack stone and slumped, dazed and bleeding. Silence fell. Alara gasped, clean air, free air, the first breath in years untainted by creeping death. She stared at her hands, watching the black veins fade to nothing. It's gone, she whispered. It's actually gone. Kara and Junie collapsed against their mother, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. And Dorian fell forward, the poisoned blade still lodged in his shoulder, his immortal essence nearly depleted, and lay motionless on the cold stone floor. Dorian, Alara crawled to him, turned him over. His skin was ashen, his breathing shallow. No, you don't get to save me just to die. His eyes flickered open, barely focusing. Did it work? He whispered. Yes, you idiot, it worked.
Good.
A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. Worth it. His eyes closed. Around them, Malric's remaining forces surrendered or fled. The coup was broken. The curse was shattered. But in Alara's arms, the vampire king who'd risked everything lay still as death, and no one knew if he would wake again. For 3 days, Dorian Blackthorn lay motionless in his bed, pale as moonlight even by vampire standards. The poison from Malric's blade had nearly killed him. The ritual had drained his immortal essence to a thread. But he lived. Barely. Alara never left his side. She sat in the chair beside him, her hand clasped around his cold fingers, marveling at the absence of pain in her own body. The curse was gone, truly, completely gone. After 17 years of slow death, she could breathe without agony, move without trembling, live without counting her remaining days. But the price had been almost too high. Kara and Junie took turns keeping vigil, curled together on the window seat, watching their mother watch the man they were just beginning to understand might actually be their father. Will he wake up? Junie whispered on the third night. He has to, Kara said fiercely. After everything, he has to. As if hearing her, Dorian's fingers twitched. Alara gasped. Dorian. His eyes opened slowly, silver and unfocused. He blinked at the ceiling, at Alara's face hovering above him, at the two girls rushing to the bedside. Did we? His voice was a rasp. Did it work? You stupid, reckless. Alara's words caught on a sob.
Yes.
It worked. The curse is gone. You nearly died saving me. Worth it, he breathed, exactly as he had before losing consciousness. Kara surprised herself by grabbing his hand. Don't do that again. Dying dramatically. It's not as heroic as you think. A weak smile crossed his lips. Noted. Junie climbed carefully onto the bed, studying him with her solemn dark eyes. Are you really our father? The question hung in the air, fragile and enormous. Dorian looked at Alara, who nodded permission. Then he looked at both girls, Kara with her fierce protectiveness, Junie with her quiet strength, and saw himself reflected in their faces. Yes, he said softly. I'm your father, and I know I wasn't there when you needed me. I know I failed you for 17 years. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. Not ever again. Junie's eyes filled with tears. Promise. I promise. The word hung between them like an oath sealed in blood. 7 days later, the throne hall filled with nobles, guards, and courtiers summoned for an emergency assembly. Whispers raced through the crowd. The king had survived. The council had fallen. The mortal woman lived. The half-breed children had displayed impossible power. The kingdom held its breath. Dorian entered, still pale but steady, and ascended to the obsidian throne. But he didn't sit alone. Alara stood at his right hand, no longer dressed in healer's homespun but in deep blue silk that marked her as nobility. Kara and Junie flanked them, wearing silver circlets that caught the light. The statement was unmistakable. Chains rattled as Malric Vane was dragged forward, stripped of his chancellor's robes, bruised and beaten. Behind him came the surviving conspirators, nobles who'd bet on the wrong side, guards who'd followed orders without question. Malric Vane, Dorian's voice rang through the hall. You stand accused of treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and the cursing of an innocent woman. How do you answer? Malric lifted his head, defiant even in chains. I did what was necessary to preserve our race. Humans weaken us. Hybrids corrupt our bloodlines. History will vindicate. History, Dorian cut him off, will remember you as a coward who tortured a woman for loving someone beyond her station. Silas Rook, Calderwin, testify. The two guards stepped forward and in stark, unflinching detail described the night 17 years ago when they dragged Alara from her village and watched Malric's mage brand her with a curse designed to kill slowly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even those who'd supported blood purity laws looked shaken. You had no right, a noble called out. The king had given no such order. The council acted to protect the throne. Malric spat. The king was young, foolish, compromised by mortal sentiment. The council, Dorian said coldly, acted to protect their own power. And in doing so, they stole 17 years from me, from my family, from the woman I loved, and the daughters I never knew existed. Silence. You deserve execution, Dorian continued, standing. All of you. But I won't build a new kingdom on mountains of corpses. Malric Vane, Lady Vessa's co-conspirators, the 3 elder mages who cast the curse, you are stripped of all titles, lands, and privileges. You will be imprisoned in the northern fortress for the remainder of your immortal lives. Malric's face twisted with rage. You're weak. I'm merciful. There's a difference. Dorian turned to the lesser nobles who'd sided with the coup. As for the rest of you, swear fealty to the new order, accept these changes, and you may retain your positions. Refuse, and join Malric in exile. One by one they knelt, Dorian descended from the throne and stood before the assembled court. The old council is dissolved. In its place, I'm forming a new advisory circle, one that includes vampire nobility, yes, but also trusted warriors like Silas and Calder and representatives from the mortal communities we've ignored for too long. Shock rippled through the crowd. Furthermore, Dorian continued, his voice carrying to every corner, I name Alara Ellis as royal healer and advisor on human affairs. Her voice will carry equal weight to any noble in this hall. Alara stepped forward, chin raised, meeting the stares with quiet dignity. And finally, Dorian placed a hand on each of his daughter's shoulders. I formally recognize Kara Ellis Blackthorne and Junie Ellis Blackthorne as my legitimate heirs. They are hybrids, both human and vampire, belonging to both worlds. They represent the future of this kingdom, whether you're ready for it or not. The hall erupted. Some nobles looked scandalized. Others appeared thoughtful. But many, especially the younger vampires who'd witnessed Kara's shockwave of power and Junie's command of ancient wards, looked at the girls with something approaching awe. The prophecy, someone whispered. They're the ones from the prophecy. Dorian let the murmurs build, then raised a hand for silence. Change is coming. We can resist it and tear ourselves apart, or we can adapt and become stronger. I know which path I choose. He returned to the throne, his family beside him, and waited. Slowly, the nobles knelt. Not all of them, not happily, but enough. The kingdom had shifted. In the training courtyard, Kara sparred with Silas, her movements fluid and confident. She no longer apologized when her hybrid strength shattered practice dummies. Instead, she laughed and asked for stronger targets. Better, Silas approved. You're learning to trust your power instead of fear it. Feels good, Kara admitted, wiping sweat from her brow. For the first time in my life, I'm not hiding. In the Citadel Gardens, Junie knelt beside a shadowed rose bush that had withered from lack of sunlight. She pressed her small hands to the soil and felt the energy lines running beneath. Light bloomed from her palms, warm, gentle, coaxing. The roses unfurled, color returning to petals that had been gray and dying. Alara watched from the archway, tears in her eyes. You're going to do extraordinary things, little one. Junie looked up and smiled. I know. At twilight, Dorian and Alara stood on the highest balcony, watching the sun sink below the mountains. Below them, the city sprawled, vampire and human districts slowly beginning to blur as new policies took effect. I've been approached by 3 human kingdoms, Alara said quietly. They want to negotiate trade agreements, peace treaties. They're cautiously hopeful that things are changing. Are they? I think so.
Slowly, painfully, but yes.
Dorian slipped his hand into hers. I never imagined this. A family, a future that wasn't built on fear and domination. Neither did I. She leaned against him. But here we are. Here we are. They stood in comfortable silence as stars began to appear, the blood moon long past, replaced by ordinary silver light. The girls asked if we were going to get married. Alara said, a hint of amusement in her voice. Dorian went very still. What did you tell them? That their father should probably ask me first. He turned to face her fully. This woman who'd survived 17 years of hell and emerged unbroken, who'd raised his daughters alone and taught them to be brave. Alara Ellis, he said softly, will you marry me? Not because of politics or prophecy or royal obligation, but because I love you. Because I never stopped loving you. Because I want to spend whatever forever we have left building the world our daughters deserve. She smiled through tears.
Yes.
Obviously, yes. Later, standing alone in the throne room after everyone had retired, Dorian ran his hand along the cold obsidian of his seat. He'd once ruled this kingdom alone, a solitary king on a throne of stone and secrets, surrounded by vipers who whispered poison and called it counsel. Now he ruled with a family he'd almost lost, in a kingdom he'd almost destroyed, fighting every day to protect a fragile peace that most believed impossible. It was harder this way, more complicated, more dangerous. But as he heard Kara's laughter echo down the corridor, as he felt Alara's presence like warmth in his cold world, as he imagined Junie bringing life to dead gardens, Dorian smiled. This was what it meant to be king. Not power, not fear, not dominion.
This.
Family.
Hope.
The choice, every day, to fight for something better than what came before. He turned from the throne and walked toward the sound of his daughter's voices, toward the life he'd been given a second chance to live. And for the first time in 17 years, Dorian Blackthorne felt truly, completely home.
The end.